Let's discuss this more with Ritesh Kotak, a tech and cybersecurity expert from Toronto. Ritesh, firstly, as we heard just now, there was only 3 hours to debate this new law. Is that enough, and is this something that has been rushed through? What do you make of the process and whether it's been thought through?
It's clearly not enough. And I think when it comes to something this big, you do have to do your due diligence. I think one of the big telling things here is that when it actually comes to the technical side of this on age verification, how on earth are you going to be able to verify if somebody is 16 or younger or above in this case without access without verifying through government ID, which I believe the law states that you can't ask for government ID. So that leaves a big question around with these tech companies on age verification. Are they going to use a vouch method? Are they going to do some sort of social profiling on the account to validate? Are they going to do any sort of biometrics? So these are all big question marks. So I think the intentions may be noble, but the execution may be flawed.
And so a few holes there in terms of how it will actually be enforced, because that's what I was going to ask you. How can this actually be enforced? And it does sound good, $33 million, but do you expect that these social media giants will ever actually be fined?
I think one thing that we have seen is the resistance from big tech and social media when they do try to get regulated. We've seen this globally around issues around news regulations. Can you post or not post? Should you be paying news agencies? We've seen this with online harm as well. Legislation around the world that looks at misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes. We're all struggling trying to figure this out. And some of the responses from some of these platforms has been, okay, you're going to make it absolutely impossible for us to operate within this ecosystem. So we're just going to pull out or turn off certain features, which in itself disenfranchises a whole group of individuals or parts of the world that aren't able to get certain content. So I think we're still waiting for big tech and social media's response on this, on are they going to put the mechanisms in place and they got to pay out of pocket for this, or are they going to say it's just not worth it and we'll see a scaling back of services that are offered to citizens? That's the big question mark here.
And there are fears that it'll push kids into darker places on the internet. Do you think that is a legitimate concern?
Absolutely, that's a legitimate concern. We've seen when there are restrictions, and these are country-based restrictions, there are ways of bypassing that. There are ways of using virtual private networks, proxy servers, so you could physically be in one location, but virtually be somewhere else, and you're able to then access content that may be not available within a particular region. So we have seen that. We have seen organizations put methods in place to counteract that, but it's a game of cat and mouse. You figure out one way to solve it, and there's like new ways that just pop out of circumventing these mechanisms, especially when it comes to regulating content on the internet. So yes, there will be. I can almost guarantee that there will be a situation where people will figure out ways of circumventing the system and doing it by using virtual private networks and proxy servers.
Okay, and in your view, this has been sort of rushed through and perhaps not totally thought through, but in your view, is there a need for a law like this? Of course, we do know that there's evidence regarding mental health for young people spending too much time on social media. Do you think a law of this nature is needed in some form?
Clearly, there needs to be regulation when it comes to social media and these platforms. I think we've had 20th century frameworks to deal with 21st century problems. And when it comes to online harm, when it comes to validating and verifying content, deciphering fact from fiction has become very difficult. And clearly, young people, as their minds and brains are developing, that could be extremely detrimental. So I think cutting somebody off from the platform is not the answer, but creating a safer platform, having better content, having age-appropriate content being pushed to individuals. And platforms have invested in that. So I think that is a better solution instead of saying, sorry, you can't access this content, where people are just going to figure out ways of circumventing it.
Ritesh Kotak, tech and cybersecurity expert from Toronto. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.